What's up, everybody? It's Greg Birch with Delta Financial, and this is the Be the Difference podcast. This podcast is all about making you a better person in your life and in your business with coaching on sales, leadership, mindset, marketing, everything under the sun when it comes to being an entrepreneur. And we bring on guest speakers. Today, I've got the honor and pleasure of welcoming Miss Regina Huber. Did I pronounce that right?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. You did an excellent job pronouncing my name. That's great.
Okay,
I'm
awesome.
delighted to be here with you, Greg. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming on board and just spending time to share your experiences and your knowledge with the audience. I think this is going to be a great podcast.
I hope so. My intention is certainly to inspire your audience, or our audience, I should say.
Yes, definitely. So for those of you that don't know who Regina is, let me go ahead and introduce her. She is the CEO of her coaching, speaking, and training business, Transform Your Performance. Regina drives bold, value-driven leadership. She helps her clients reach their next career goal all the way to the C-suite. Her holistic coaching approach focuses on upgrading her clients' leadership of self and others so that they can implement their vision while reducing their stress. Her eclectic experience on 5 continents started in Germany and includes leadership positions at BCG, as well as ownership of businesses in Argentina, Brazil, and the US. This experience shaped her into a multicultural transformational leadership coach, international inspirational speaker, and author of Speak Up, Stand Out, and Shine, as well as leadership-focused white paper, in addition to co-authoring 3 other books and writing numerous articles for magazines and her LinkedIn Career Growth Strategies newsletter. Regina created her signature coaching frameworks, Powerful Leadership Transformation, New Paradigm Leadership, and Dream Salary Negotiations, and is a conversational intelligence enhanced skills practitioner. She speaks 5 languages and has translated 12 books. As a professional nomad, she also loves to travel and dance. Regina, wow, I love it.
Yeah, so I definitely have had an adventurous life so far, to say the least.
Absolutely, I can tell. That's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
So I always like to start off at the beginning. Mm-hmm. So talk to the audience at the moment at which this kind of journey started and what got you into doing this, and what was that? Usually I feel that most times when I've sat with or interviewed different professionals that have their own businesses or they have their specific niche, there's some kind of pivotal moment that started it all, that got them to think like, I can do this, right? So let's talk about that and kind of dive into what got you to where you are today.
Right. Actually, where it started is, and you probably have heard this, right? My accent gives it away. I'm from Germany, and I grew up on a little farm in a tiny village. And when you said, okay, when did this adventure, this particular project start? Then I actually think it started back then. You know, because of my adventurous spirit. So, for example, right, I hitchhiked to Amsterdam at the age of 16. I did a lot of backpacking back in the day. And at 19, then I moved to Munich, and then from there to Spain, and so on and so forth. So later to Brazil, Argentina, and the US.
Yeah.
And more recently, I've spent more time in Africa as well, both for fun. But I've always really had this adventurous spirit inside of me, despite being extremely shy as a little girl. So I would be the one who would never say a word, right? Yeah. So you would not have been able to interview me back then. And so then I worked for a global consulting firm for 16 years, as you said before. And I also have my own businesses. But everything has really led up to this, because this very eclectic experience gives me all I need to have my very unique approach in my coaching business, right? So that our experiences, our stories make us who we are as entrepreneurs. And eventually they result in this why that we often talk about. Mm-hmm. So why do I do what I do? Well, yes, there was a pivotal moment for sure. So when I was in Brazil, I had my own business. It was a very different business, actually, a brick and mortar. I'd studied a lot of holistic modalities. I love dance. So it was a combination of those two things. And I had spent an entire year building this business, building out the property and all of that, right? It was a challenging experience right from the start because not everything is always that easy in an environment where you are. I wasn't new there, but I wasn't from there, right?
Mm.
So I learned a lot of lessons along the way already, but then I unfortunately had partnered up with a fraudulent business partner for part of this. So what that did is I lost my business in the process. Eventually, I lost a lot of money and I lost my self-esteem as well. And I had to learn how to step from a victim mindset into a self-empowering mindset. Yes. And because of what I had studied, these holistic modalities and all of that, this really helped me in that process, but it did take a while. But as soon as I did that, I knew that we can build our confidence again from scratch. And of course, most of my clients are not at that low level that I was at the time after that experience, but I have learned how to do all this, how to trust myself more, how to help others trust themselves more, and how to help them also bring out more of their limitless potential. Because as you know, our potential is unlimited, but we only use a fraction of it usually.
Yes.
And that's then, and also how to gain greater self-awareness, how to go into this self-discovery process so that we can gain this awareness, understand ourselves better, and understand our potential better, and also what our unique brilliance is. So I like to talk a lot about knowing, owning, and showing your value.
Mm-hmm.
Because oftentimes we hear we got to own our value, but how are we going to own it if we don't know what exactly it is and, all the depths of it? And so that's what I also guide my clients through, to find that very unique brilliance inside of them. And I call that your distinctive uniqueness. Your distinctive uniqueness, of course, also has the shadow side of it, but we want to work with that too, to either, either compensate for some of our shortcomings in some way, or just also acknowledge that we can focus more on our natural strengths and talents and really be deeply aware, and then bring those to the forefront, right? And I think that's a big part of what authenticity is really about.
Yes. And I love how you're talking about specifically about potential. Mm-hmm. And I always talk to agents within my company and talk about the fact how I feel, and what you're saying as well is that your potential is unknown and unlimited. Mm-hmm. And so you don't know where, in fact, and we'll never really reach it. It's a lifelong journey of continually pushing your boundaries and trying to chase that potential to become the best version of yourself. So when it comes to a holistic approach and the way that you did it, when you hit rock bottom and you had to rebuild your confidence and rebuild that self-esteem, how did you do it from a holistic standpoint?
Yeah, so my holistic studies helped me tremendously in this process. I was also lucky to have a sounding board around me of friends who had studied similar modalities, or some of the same that I did. And what it helped me is to really get to the depths of not just what else I was capable of, but also my subconscious blocks and all of that. I know a lot of people talk about this, but we really need to go deep with all this. We talk so much about mindset. Mindset isn't just some superficial concept. It starts deep down. We are so conditioned, and we are actually not born as clean slates. We already bring a lot to this world, a lot of conditioning from our ancestors and our genes and whatnot. So we need to recognize this and not become a victim of it, but use it for self-awareness and do something with it that actually serves us. Well, this conditioning, awareness is the first step, but then also how can we get rid of these blocks in a way, or move through them?
It sounds like right now what you're talking a lot about is kind of what you put in a lot of the discussions that you and I had exchanged beforehand, which is the heart set over the mindset. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Kind of, and explain. This is the first time I've ever heard someone explain it, heart set over mindset. So I love this, but I want you to go over that.
Okay. Yeah. So I always say, when you only focus on mindset, then you miss out on at least 50% of your intelligence and actually of your unique wisdom, because your unique wisdom lives in your heart. Yes. Our mind is very rational, very logical. A lot of us are very left brain oriented or focused, because that's how our society tells us we should be, and how we are educated most of the time. And I believe that, sorry, a mind led by the heart is the most powerful one, because you might have heard this before, right? The heart is a part of our brain, really, and but the mind is sort of different, right? So the heart even can survive independently for a few, at least, seconds, and it has about 40,000 brain-like cells that create their own neural networks and that think. They don't really think, but think, just to use a term, independently of the cranial brain, or head brain, as we sometimes call it. So your heart also has the strongest bioelectrical and magnetic fields in your body. Scientists have found, and I want to quote Heart Math Institute here, because a lot of research has been done at that institute, but they have found that the heart's electrical field is about 100 times stronger than the brain's electrical field, but the magnetic field of the heart can be up to 5,000 times stronger.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so that's a lot, right?
Yeah.
And this means, logically, that our connection with the world around us, to a very great extent, happens through our hearts and the strong magnetic frequency that our heart sends out. And it has a huge role in relationships, also in business, as well as in manifesting or attracting, whatever your word is, what we want, because magnets attract, right?
Yes. I'm a big fan of law of attraction. Big fan.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot more to this, of course, but I always like to say also, fear is in your mind, courage is in your heart.
Okay, I like that.
And we have proof of it through the word doesn't come up. It doesn't want to come out. The root of the of the word, right? Courage in many, many languages has the same root as heart, like cœur, courage in French, for example. I could give you many more examples, like Portuguese, Spanish, whatnot.
Yeah.
Even in German, we have an old word for courage that sounds like, that comes from the word Herz. So what we can also find really in the heart, once we really learn to connect with it more and harness the power of the heart, is inspiration, intuition, compassion, love, self-love. But these are also important things that we need as entrepreneurs, I believe, right?
Yes.
And that unique wisdom, of course. So it's a great way, or a great tool, or supporter, whatever you want to call it, to make decisions, the right decisions for us, for ourselves. They're not decisions for other people, they're for us. So especially those tough life decisions are best made from the heart, right? And when we ignore that wisdom of the heart and that intuitive voice that comes from it, oftentimes we don't make the right decision. And those are usually the pain decisions. I'm not saying there's anybody who's never gone through pain. Yeah, because we are supposed to learn and grow through those experiences. But sometimes if we connected more to our hearts and listened more, we could avoid some of the pain probably along the way.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I have so many questions. So for the audience that's never heard of this concept of the heart set and what you just went over, what are some ways that they can learn to tap into it in order to be more effective at like listening to those decisions? And
Yeah, so it's a really great question, because it requires practice. It requires alone time. It requires you giving yourself the time and permission to ask questions, for example, to your heart, right? It's not gonna maybe work immediately. It's like when you want to hear your intuitive voice. Sometimes it's hard to distinguish what the lot, like our busy mind wants to tell us, and that intuitive voice, right? So it requires practice. I did make some YouTube videos that can help us connect to your heart, really focusing on your heart, closing your eyes, and taking that time. It's probably a better exercise to do on your own rather than on a show, because it sometimes requires for us to be in the right space, in the right moment. Yes. And also,
I can put the in the show notes. We can link your YouTube channel so people can go
right.
watch those.
Yeah, there is an entire playlist for that topic.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Yeah. And it's also really in acknowledging the power of the heart, and knowing these facts can help us do that, I believe. Right.
So when you're talking earlier about heartset and the importance of the heart in making decisions, you talked about two key concepts that I really want to dig into and dive into. One is you talked about the law of attraction, and two, you talked about intuition and the power of those two. And so what I found is that I'm a very I'm an ENTP, so I'm very perceptive.
Yeah.
And I use a lot of times I'll use my perception, I will use intuition in order to make decisions. And it's just sometimes I can't explain it for the decisions I want to make. I just know it's the right decision. There's something about the time frame or something. And so the way I've usually explained it is that I'm certain that there's probably some details or small bits of information that my subconscious has picked up that's sending signals that's like, hey, it's time to move on this, right? And my conscious brain has not actually whittled through all of that data in order to say, hey, you're going to do it and here's why. It's just like, hey, today's the day to do this. And I just feel compelled, and I've been lucky enough that I listen to those urges that I get within myself. And I think pairing that, you talk about talking to yourself and asking yourself questions. I think that's a perfect segue, because it allows you to tell the universe what it is that you want, or even ask of the universe how to get what you want, right? Whatever your goal is, what you want to do in business, maybe you want to find the love of your life and you're unhappy because you've been lonely for however long, but you're looking for specific things. And then you start to write out, hey, this is what I'm looking for. Like I like writing those things out, almost like putting it out in the universe and making it real. And then it kind of locks into my subconscious, I'm brain farting right now, and I don't even know what to call it. What it calls there's a piece of your brain that literally like filters all the information out and filters out all the unimportant data, but that starts to pump and pull in, attract the right information that kind of tells you, hey, this is where you got to go, and it gives you those intuitive signals. So when it comes to intuition, I guess my question is when it comes to intuition, how would you explain that to your coaching clients or to the audience on the importance of that, and then how to build it?
Okay. So, you just said something that is really relevant for some people to hear. Not everybody makes decisions in the same way. So you might have an advantage to some extent that you are, really listening to your gut. I'm assuming, I'm just making an assumption right here, that for you, it's more like the gut feeling.
Yes.
Right. So
Yep.
some people might refer to it more as a heart and others more as a gut. And I'm currently studying the deeper details of human design. I don't know if you've ever heard of this. You could do like a disc test or your Myers-Briggs that you mentioned, right? Or you could do something like this, which is more astrology related, and it basically has 5 main types, and depending on what type you are and some sub details, the way you make decisions is determined by that. The way you make the best decisions, you might not make your decisions in the right way right now. And for you, and without knowing what you are, without seeing your chart or whatever, it could be, I'm not making, but uncomfortable making assumptions because there's
It's
so
fine.
much
I like it. I love it.
to it. But, maybe you are somebody who is that manifesting generator. I'm just making an assumption right here. You might not be, right? But who has that gut authority, or at least you have gut authority somehow. Authority is another technical term of human design. And I have not studied enough. I have to say this clearly to the audience to really know all the details. I'm in the process of studying more, but I've used it for myself and to gain self-awareness for a while now. And, then your way in that case would be to actually make the best decisions in that way with that first gut response, right? But there are other people like me. I tend to make impulsive decisions, and sometimes they were right and sometimes they were not so great. So my correct way would actually be to wade through an emotional cycle, through an emotional wave, and then reconsider whether my feeling about that decision is still the same. And so different people have different ways to make decisions. Having said that, though, what's really important is to remember to listen to your heart in some way. For you want to call it gut, that's fine. But our heart has an important role in our lives. It's where you get a lot of goodies from, a lot of treasures from. It's like a treasure chest, I sometimes say. And just, for most people, it's not just that mental piece.
Yeah.
That's why pro and con lists do not work for most people. I've never actually met anybody who they work for, frankly. They've never worked for me. If anything, I always say, if you need to make a list like that, make a pro and pro list. Because make a pro, if you are between two options, make a list of pros of the one option, a list of pro of the other. What I just said, of course, there are situations when you really need to do your due diligence. I'm not minimizing the importance of this, right? I want to say that very clearly too. But sometimes we overvalue so-called facts because many of the so-called facts aren't even facts. They are opinions of somebody else. And we take them on as some type of truth because we think we have to respond to the expectations of other people's, minds, whatever. So it's a very complex topic. I just think what you do, and if you're more that person who goes inside, you actually I do believe you have an advantage in this sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would agree. I would absolutely. And my one of my mentors, he kind of teases me because he'll be like, "Hey, you need to do this," and I'm like, "It's not time yet." And he was like, "It's not." After a while, he got to know me. He was like, "You're just gonna call me one day and be like, hey, dude, it's time. I'm doing it today." Like, and then it ends up doing very well. Like it's just like something clicks in me, and I'm like, and I wake up and I'm like, today's the day. I'm doing this, right? And I just know, like it's maybe it's time for it to marinate. I don't know. I don't understand why, and I don't really question why. I just know that I go off of that instinct, right? And to even further validate the point that you're making is that facts and data do not drive decisions. They validate the decisions that we make. Emotions drive decisions. We make decisions based off of emotions. And where do we identify most of our emotions with? Our heart.
Yeah, exactly. And we need to be sometimes have that time to figure out whether that's, whether that emotion will persist over a specific period of time and whether it still feels good tomorrow. So as I said before, different people make their best decisions differently according to who they are, or as a human design would say, according to who they are designed to be. But,
Yes.
whatever system you use, you don't have to, buy into this. But you have to somehow figure it out for yourself. How it's a self-observation, right? When have I made the decisions that have given me the best results?
Absolutely. And while we're on the topic of feelings, let's talk about passion, like
Mhm.
infusing passion into your business, determining your passion.
Mhm.
When you're coaching with your clients, how do you go about discussing passion with them?
Yeah. So again, some people need more passion to go into their work than others, right? So they
Yeah.
just really need this. And I think uh, the role of passion is really important for entrepreneurs because we oftentimes have to have that passion to hang in there, to get something going when the going gets tough,
Oh,
to
that's
get
so true.
ourselves going when the going gets tough, right?
That's so
So
good.
we have to have this strong why, or that passion behind it.
Mm.
And then I sometimes also think that some people might not need it in their particular job. They need maybe a money making job right now, but they need to for the passion to show up somewhere else in their lives, for example.
Mhm.
And in another project maybe they do on the side. Or one other thing is, though, that when I talk to my clients is, what are your biggest passions, and how can you bring seemingly unrelated passions into your job or into your business, or how can those flow into your job or business, right? So
Mm.
for example, I have a passion for dance. I did not grow up as a dancer. I did not grow up with dance, but I love dance, and I always look for it. Like when I move somewhere, I try to figure out also, is there dance, the right type of dance for me that I fancy at that moment, right?
Yeah.
And and so right now it's a lot of African dancing, a lot of like maybe some Haitian, maybe some, and there used to be a lot of Brazilian and whatnot, and then a lot of salsa and whatnot in the past, but it's also evolved over time, and our passions do evolve,
Mhm.
right? So, but in terms of this particular passion, well, it doesn't seem to be completely related to my work, to what I do, coaching, does it? Right?
Yeah.
But I have learned so many lessons through dance, and I'm bringing some of that wisdom that I gained through those lessons into my coaching. Like, for example, I learned a lot about presence, business presence,
Yeah.
leadership presence, whatever you want to call it. I learned about the role of energy in our business presence.
Yeah.
I learned about confidence, how to find it when you don't necessarily feel it in the moment. And I learned about self expression, creativity, individuation, intentionality. When you do partner dancing and you're the leader, you have to communicate that intention non-verbally,
Yeah.
right? Through signs. I have to also learn how to read people's cues and signs in that dancing teamwork together.
Oh, this is
Yes.
so good. I love this. Like,
And also, yeah.
everything you're going over.
Yeah. So even if you go beyond that in the dance ensemble, I'm not a professional dancer, but I have done a few like fun shows. And
Yeah.
it's also about how do you use your space together with others, whether it's on a stage or whether it's on the dance floor or even just in a dance class in the studio, right?
Mm.
So I've written about this a few times already on my blog, my newsletter,
Mm.
and even also the role of energy and all of that. So I did write a book in the past when I had to rebuild my self-confidence and self-esteem, where I share some of those tools, that can help us. Gain confidence in the moment, be more present in the moment, and all the good stuff. And it's on Amazon if anybody wants to check that out. It's called Speak Up, Stand Out, and Shine.
So, and we'll put that in the show notes as well, so that you guys can go check that out. You definitely want to, after talking to you, I'm going to go check it out, Regina. So I love how you're talking about, it's almost like this roundabout way to learn through following the thing that you are just naturally drawn to. And it's almost like like the universe and life is going to give you the lessons that you need by not fighting and just going forward and going towards where you're drawn to. Right. And you happen to do the dance. And through that, instead of going a direct path to like, okay, let's say you did want to do business and you did this direct path of like, I want to be a CEO of a company. I want to do this, I want to learn these things. Your path would have been drastically different and probably would have had significantly different challenges and obstacles trying to just go directly there. But instead you said, man, I really love dance. I want to focus on this. And through that, you enjoyed the process, you learned a ton, and you took those lessons, applied it to your business. This is powerful. I love this. This is great.
Yeah, and this is also how it feels more authentic, more aligned. You feel more aligned with it. It's more fulfilling. And I don't always talk about dance in my, I hardly ever talk about dance in my coaching sessions. I talk about what we want to work on and specific situations, but this knowledge somehow comes in intrinsically, right?
Yes.
And it flows in, and that's what each of us coaches makes what makes us different. Where did we gather this wisdom? Through our stories, our experiences, but also through our passions. And so sometimes it's something that's not really obviously connected, but it can still come in, right?
Yes, absolutely. And so to relate to that, I'm very passionate about lifting and bodybuilding. I have been since I was a kid. I was a scrawny kid. And I was that kid that always like looked at superheroes. I had a passion for art. I wanted to be a comic book artist, and I used to draw, but I was always interested in like the superheroes that were really muscular. And then that got me interested in like bodybuilding as I got older. And I started lifting in 2009. And so that's when I started lifting with a friend, and I started to grow and I started to get stronger and I started to build, and I was skinny. I'm 6'7". You can't tell, but I'm a big guy. I was 6'7" and 180. Right. And I went from 6'7", 180 to 6'7" and 250 within about a 9-month period, just by working out all the time, really watching my diet and implementing these different strategies that I learned. But it was through that process of doing that, because I was very passionate about it. I got what we called the bug. I was just like, I got to lift all the time. Like if I had an off day, I was like, man, I got to get back to the gym. Right. Because I was so excited. But it taught me the power of consistency. It taught me like because I never thought I could get big because I was so skinny and I used to eat whatever I wanted to. But what I found was when I actually paid attention to the fine details, when I was consistent with my schedule and I had an actual plan, that there was going to be results. Input equals output. And it taught me that, right? It taught me confidence. I got my confidence skyrocketed because I was so self-conscious with my image because I was so skinny. And now I'm like more of a presence. It taught me presence. Like now when I walk into a place, I walk in and it's just like people can tell, they can feel it, right? And they start to look at me because I'm tall, but I'm also very well built, right? And so it was through my passion of going and doing lifting consistently, and I haven't stopped since then, that it taught me all these other things.
Right.
And so you're so right. Like, and I never thought about it like that, but I have applied it almost intrinsically.
Yeah. And just think about how you're applying energy and how the quality of your energy has changed.
Yeah.
And it's coming through, and it's not so much about the quantity of energy. It's more about the quality of energy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
So, but on the other hand, we hardly ever speak about energy in business. So why is that if everything is energy? I wonder why, right? So maybe somebody doesn't want us to be as powerful as we could be.
It could be.
That's cool, right? But it's really about that. And energy is so important also because we always talk about those famous 7 seconds that it takes to make a first impression. Have you heard that? Right. For
Yes.
sure. And but what's interesting is that it only takes 0.07 seconds for our brains to figure out whether we can trust someone. And that's about our energy. So that's much shorter. It's our survival mechanism. It's how we survive. So it has to be super fast. We
Yeah.
don't have 7 seconds in a survival, die or live situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's about that.
Absolutely. So if someone were to come to you and say, Regina, I don't know what my passion is. How do I find my passion? What would you tell them?
Well, you have mentioned something actually that can serve them before, and you mentioned questions. I think questions are so powerful, right? What matters to you?
Mm.
What irks you? What would you like to see change? This show is about making a difference. Would you like to make a difference about? Sometimes it's a fun passion. Sometimes it's a passion that pushes
An
us to
impact.
take action, right?
Yeah.
And so I think these questions can really help us. Also, what are some talents that you might have neglected that are dormant, but that you would really enjoy bringing out? What else is in your potential that, and sometimes we don't allow ourselves to live our passion because
Yeah.
sometimes we feel like we need to live up to other people's expectations. So if you feel like sometimes even also frustrated, then maybe that's because you're not following your passion. Maybe because what you do is not aligned with what you're passionate about. And maybe it's just because I even use coaches because we are not supposed to make decisions for our clients.
Yeah.
We're supposed to guide them to make their best decisions, but not to make decisions
I
for them.
decided for them.
Yeah. So I'm not pushing anybody into any specific direction rather, but I help them, I always say no one can empower you but yourself. So the bad news is no one can empower you, but the good news is you can empower yourself.
Yes. It all starts with yourself.
Right. And you can, but we can guide people to that place where they can do that more easily and where they can find the answers through, asking the right questions. And some people do better with yes and no questions, and some people do better with open-ended questions.
I love open-ended questions. So Regina, I used to be in the military.
Mhm.
I was a military intelligence officer. I specialized in human intelligence and interrogations. And so they were big on asking open-ended questions to draw more information. And
Right.
questions that start with what and how, specifically. What, how, when. And what you'd find is that with a yes or no, it's very easy for people to lie and just say yes or no, or not answer authentically. I think it would be. Whereas if it's like, hey, what do you mean by this? Or hey, what is a passion of yours? Oh, I don't know what my passion is. Okay, well, what do you enjoy to do? What's something that you feel that you're talented at or skilled at? What is something that bothers you or irks you, like you said? And asking those questions, I think are much more effective at getting them to think through this and solve the problem themselves. It's like a self-realization as it goes through. And what I like to do is after I'm asking questions like that is I say, hey, let me go ahead and see if I understand you correctly. And I'm going to repeat everything you said to me.
Right.
And then I say everything back to them, but in my own words. So it's like, so it sounds to me like you're having a challenge finding out what your passion is. However, you do know that you're really skilled at dance because you've been practicing dance since you were 8 years old, and always wanted to do dance and you've kind of fallen off of it, but that's something that's always interested you and you've been drawn to it your entire life.
Mhm.
You just don't see the connection of how doing dance can help you in business. Is that all about right? And then they're like, yeah, that's right. Like it's on repeating,
Yeah.
showing some empathy, understanding. And then I say, well, okay, so what does that tell you? And I'd ask more questions in order to drive it home, to have them come to the solution that like, maybe I can do this and learn something from it.
Absolutely. So you're reframing everything for them and also confirming that you actually understood what they were saying at the
Yep.
same time. Now, the yes and no questions have their place.
They do have their
What
place.
you
Yeah.
just explained, it's definitely true. And I would also say, a lot of times we want to definitely use a lot of open-ended questions in team situations when we want to, figure out, for example, as a leader, a team leader, what the specific aspirations or expectations or challenges of a team member are, right? We want to have them talk about it on the other and not suggest a specific answer. However, there are certain, to go back to human design, I just learned that too, is like, in that particular modality, there are certain types that just have it easier to make a quick decision sometimes when they get a yes or no, especially also so in daily situations or, when you deal with them on a regular basis. Like, for example, you could ask somebody, your partner, what do you want to eat for dinner? Which is an open-ended question. And they might not be ready for that in that moment because they are a specific personality type or type in that case. And they do better with a yes or no or an and an or. And because then they can make a decision really quick and it doesn't interrupt their creative flow, whatever, right? So I think there's a place for everything, but when you want to figure out your passion, this context, yes, you're right, and there might actually be a place even for a yes and no, during a specific process or step in the process, rather.
Yeah.
I know this goes into a lot of detail, and now the sirens are coming here.
No worries.
But you cannot cut that out. So yeah, it's really interesting. Questions are so powerful. Even also, I like them better than affirmations. For example, I use empowering, in that case, empowering what if questions. I call those. Like, what if I could actually find a solution? What if that's sometimes more meaningful to our subconscious that needs to work with it than saying, I have the solution, because it contradicts our programming, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of power in questions for sure. Yeah. Thank you for explaining it so well.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I thank you for explaining it. Like as you're talking, I'm having realization and I'm like, oh man, I do this and I do it this way, but I never thought about it in that context. Especially like I don't do coaching. I coach agents that are in my company, but I don't do outside coaching. And I think that's my next question is, how did you get into coaching? Like, how did that start for you? And how did you kind of ramp that up? Because I've been interested in getting into coaching. I already do it with the agents within my company, but I would like to coach on a broader scale and help more people with sales, leadership, mindset, stuff like that.
Oh, great. Yes. When I moved from Brazil to New York at the time, around 2012, I wanted to figure out, what to do with all my very rich and eclectic, as I call it, experience that I had gathered and gained over the many years. And this was, a logical conclusion in a way. So at first I, of course, didn't know quite well who to coach. I actually started out coaching performing artists because, again, the passion. But then I also noticed that this piece that comes in through the dance and through, the holistic studies where we study the subconscious mind and energy and all of that, it also had value for other people, of course. And as I was moving through my own coaching programs, where I participated in group coaching programs and learned more about business and all of that, I met a lot of people, and specifically also women, and they said, hey, we need what what you do. We need, the message you communicate. And so over time, I changed audiences a few times. So I do work with entrepreneurs. I also work with employees. And in the recent times, I've worked actually with more employees. Because I can help them, reach their next career goal. It's oftentimes something very concrete that they want at that moment, or get a promotion, or get a specific role, or change jobs, gain clarity for that and whatnot. So, or improve their presentation skills at work, and visibility, all of that. And yes, entrepreneurs need that too, and they want it too. But I have also found that oftentimes they go more towards their hardcore business coach when it comes to spending money. So do I spend on this or that? And they don't always have the choice to spend on both or at the same time. So, that was sort of the reasoning behind it. And I can support both, but people also have to, of course, if they want to get the most out of this, come with an open mind.
Yeah.
Because what I do, I call it transformational leadership coaching, that has two pieces, right? Leadership coaching, also leading with self. You don't necessarily have to lead somebody else. You need to lead yourself first.
Yes, I say the same thing.
Right? Yeah.
If you can't lead yourself, you're not going to be able to lead others.
Exactly. So it starts with self always.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, it's that transformational piece that doesn't just work on a specific situations, although we do that, but you learn through that experience and to transform through it, and you take it with you for the rest of your life, career, or business.
Yeah. Oh man, that's so great. Thank you so much, Regina, for coming on and just explaining and sharing your experiences and your story and talking about all this. This has actually been one of my favorite episodes, just because I've never talked about like feelings and emotions and heartset. Like, this is a first. So, but I think it's super valuable for people to see it from this perspective and give them another way to kind of look. It's like another lens to view the world from. And I love that.
Yeah. And next time I'm also going to say the word etymology. Correct. Something like, okay, you want to talk too fast, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So if anyone wants to find out more about you and they want to research or look up into some of your stuff, what's the best way to find you? Is it like Instagram, or is it Facebook? Where would be the best place to connect with you?
Yeah, it's actually LinkedIn.
Okay.
I do business on LinkedIn, on YouTube. I have a YouTube channel. It's at Regina Huber. If you need to find it in that way, and I'm sure we're also going to post a link somewhere.
Yes.
So YouTube, I have several different topics. You can see different playlists. I want to do more again for YouTube very soon. So LinkedIn, I also have a career growth strategies newsletter that you can sign up for. Even if you're not in a job career, there's a lot of content that applies really to anybody. And I just recently talked about decision making in one of my articles, which is an important topic for all of us, right? And then I have my book, of course, Speak Up, Stand Out, and Shine, on Amazon. And most importantly, my website, transformyourperformance.com.
Love it. Love it. Last question I ask all my guests. If you have the choice to sit with, learn from, and break bread with 3 different individuals, anyone in history, living or passed away, who would those 3 be?
Okay. I'm going to say one, because I don't really have role models in that sense. And I've written about this too, to my philosophy. But I loved watching Pippi Longstocking as a child. I don't know if you're too young to know.
I know who Pippi Longstocking is.
So I loved her. She was very adventurous. I was very shy as a kid, but I had adventurous spirit inside of me. I wanted to travel. I wanted to see the world. That pushed me out into the world. She was the one. She didn't like to be told what to do. She rejected the traditional education system, which I do too. I feel like there's so much we could do better in education. So much that we can change there. I'm actually writing an article currently about this for an African publication. And then, and she was just, she just did what she needed to do. And she was so inspiring to the kids around her who were completely different, but she still respected them. She was friends with them, and she just had an exciting life. And I think if somebody inspired me, that's her.
I've never had a fictional character, but I like that. That's awesome. That's fantastic. I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Regina, for jumping on the Be the Difference podcast. For those of you watching or listening, I ask a favor of you. Regina and I both ask a favor of you. We want you, if this provided value, if you learned something, if you grew, if it's changed a perspective, then we ask that you share this content with somebody else that can also get value from it. We grow by word of mouth, and it only takes you 60 seconds to do a rating, review, subscribe, and share this content with somebody else. And that's how we grow. But we would be eternally grateful in order to be able to reach more hearts and minds with this. This has been the Be the Difference podcast. I'm your host, Greg Birch. As always, until next time, we'll see you.